You set foot on foreign soil. Only this land isn't ruled by any country or government. In this land, we celebrate music. In this land, we celebrate games. In this land, we celebrate those who compose video game music. Welcome to the VG Embassy. Welcome and thanks for tuning in to another episode of the VG Embassy. This is a show centered around video game music and the amazing online community of fans and podcasters that enjoy it. My name's Ed, and on each episode I'll take the role of Prime VGM Minister and invite a guest VG Ambassador onto the show to share with us their own video game music culture. Or I may share a part of my culture on a solo show, or I might have two guest VG Ambassadors on, just like I do this evening. So we are listening right now to episode 42, Battle RPG Themes with Joe and Todd. And if you are a listener of Embassy Exclusive, our Patreon show, I'm sure you guys will be very familiar with Joe and Todd.
Yep,
how are you, fellas?
Joe and Todd. You're in for a treat.
That Joe and Todd. Not the Joe and Todd from down the street.
It's been a long time since I've been on this side of the paywall.
Yeah, so when was the last time you were on the show?
No,
it's been a while.
I think it was the first show that I did, which was like the fifth show.
We did the Blind Listen. Right. And then we did the, you keep forgetting that we did the winter Patreon picks show.
Yeah. What I keep forgetting is that was a regular VG Embassy.
Oh, okay, because it did kind of feel like an Embassy exclusive.
Right.
Yeah.
What with all the drinking?
Right.
What with all the drinking. All of the holiday cheer, as it were.
There's not so much holiday cheer tonight, but there's definitely some drinking going on. We've got some chips and popcorn. We're setting it up kind of like an MC exclusive, so
don't mind the crunching.
Those of you who are not Patreon subscribers, if you do like what you hear tonight, consider donating to the VG Emissary tier or higher on our Patreon page at patreon.com/thevgembassy, and you can hear much, much more of Todd and Joe and I talking about random game topics and participating and interacting with all of our Patreon peeps.
Ooh, now there's incentive.
Yes.
Interaction.
So, Joe, a follow-up question from our last episode together.
So,
has anyone purchased your complete N64 collection yet?
No, not yet. I've had a couple of people take a look at it, make lowball offers, but the way I figure, it's end of 2019 now. It's going to go up in value over the next few years, so I'm going to hang on to it for the time being until I find a buyer.
It's true.
No real luck yet.
Once Nintendo releases the N65, though, I'm pretty sure it's all going to go down in value, so you better hop to it.
N65, huh? Wow.
One more bit of power. So what's a lowball offer? I mean, what does that look like?
I've had people say, like, I'll give you, $100 for Clay Fighter. Or I've had people say, well, I don't want all those sports games. Would you just sell, the Blockbuster exclusive games?
Oh, Jesus. Okay. Yeah.
Or I think I had one person offer me for the entire collection, like $1,500 or something like that.
Why would somebody assume that you're going to want to break up a complete collection so that you get stuck with all the sports nonsense and they get all the good stuff for like nothing?
Highway robbery.
The way I figure the only possible way of selling that garbage, apart from giving them away as $1 a piece, is as a full set.
Right.
And that's how I briefly advertised it. I got booted out of a number of N64 Facebook groups because I didn't have scans of all the PCBs or the high value games, and I just didn't feel like taking them all apart and taking photos.
Oh, yeah.
Half-assed trying to sell the collection at this point. So I figure in a few more years when the value goes up, I'll sit down, I'll take close-up scans of all the PCBs so that, everyone can see they're legit. And then I'll try again.
Yeah. Good idea.
But apparently if you try to make posts on the N64 collectors Facebook groups, they boot you out because those people are crazy.
The scammers ruin it for everybody, basically. Somebody throws a copy of Madden 97 in a Clay Fighter shell, and pretty soon they're making a $250 profit or more. And the other person gets to play football on a crappy game system. Oh, well. So, today, I think, Todd, this was your idea.
This was an idea that I pitched to you
when
you were planning. You were still in the planning stages of this podcast. And I pitched it to you as a possible show idea, and you were like, sure. And you created a document, a little bit of behind-the-scenes information there, which sat in our email boxes for however long it's been now.
A long time.
And along the way, it was going to be just you and me. You and I were talking about it one day, and in Joe's presence, and he was like, I would be like to be in on that. So now Joe's in on it too.
Yep, I horned my way in.
Okay,
right.
so just for, and I love Google Docs because it gives you an editing history. It is, the day of this recording is November 8th, 2019. We started this document on August 1st, 2018. So it's been over a year.
More than a year. This episode has sort of been in the... I'll say the planning phases, but really the ignoring phases.
Yeah, because I think you put 2 tracks on there like the first day, and then we pretty much just left it.
I put the words obligatory Final Fantasy track.
Correct.
And I put Octopath Traveler, which I was playing at the time and obsessed with.
And I had nothing. And so
had nothing.
I picked all 4 of mine. We didn't even, Joe was nothing but a gleam in our eye at that point, so he wasn't even a part.
Shiny.
And so now we decided that this would be a great show for the 3 of us to do, because I am... not so much a fan, not nearly as much of a fan of RPGs as you 2 guys are, and I've just kind of recently been getting into a little bit of them, and so I felt that with my limited kind of experience, we'd have a much more wider breadth of variety with all 3 of us here. So with that said, we are going to be focusing a lot on the music, but I think also we should focus a little bit on the different types of battle systems that these games have and what makes them different, since we're talking about the battle themes of these songs. So I know a lot of these games have very different styles of fighting, yet they're all considered kind of RPGs, so it might be fun to kind of compare and contrast that stuff as we go through the show.
Oh yeah, for sure. This is a topic we can describe in insanely high detail.
Great, I can't wait. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, this is going to be very exciting.
Anyhow, so we'll go around the table. We'll start with Todd. We've each picked 4 tracks, and we'll go round robin. Todd, what is your first pick for the evening?
I did say that I put obligatory Final Fantasy track, so let's get the obligatory Final Fantasy track out of the way. I picked the battle theme from Final Fantasy X. This was released on the PS2 in 2001, and this track was composed by Nobuo Uematsu, according to the internet, although there were 2 composers for the actual soundtrack in that game. I can't remember what the other one was.
Oh, okay. We'll find them and we'll mention them when we come back.
Welcome back. That was the battle theme from Final Fantasy X. The actual track, according to the internet, was composed by Nobuo Uematsu, but the soundtrack also includes Junya Nakano and Masashi. You want to give that one a try, Ed?
Hamautsu? Something like that.
My apologies, Masashi. I picked this over what might be a more obvious track like Final Fantasy VI, because Final Fantasy X is the first Final Fantasy that my then girlfriend, but now wife, played together. So it has special meaning to me.
Gotcha. In terms of the music, because I'm not familiar with this game really at all, and the soundtrack even less so, I was surprised that the song was slower than the usual Final Fantasy battle themes. Like, I'm very familiar with the ones from 6 and 7, and they're very kind of fast, pump you up. This feels like the music from 7, but like 75% as fast as it. And it felt very much like traditional Final Fantasy music, which, from what I understand, a lot of the other music on this soundtrack does not. So does this kind of stick out when you're playing through the game as being more traditionally Final Fantasy?
I mean, it's certainly more in your face. Most of the game is a lot of very environmental tracks, either out in the world, or in a town or a dungeon or whatever. It's very quiet but very environmental music in most of this game, and that's kind of the direction that Square has taken ever since really this game. I think all of the previous, and back me up on this, Joe, Final Fantasy games had much more I'll say louder soundtracks than this. So yeah, the battle theme in this definitely is more in your face than the rest of the soundtrack.
Oh, for sure. It also has, I'll say, a much more modern feel to it than the soundtracks and the games from the earlier iterations of the series. I found that once it moved into the PS2, things not only started looking a little more realistic and sounding a little more realistic, but the stories, I don't know, seemed a little less fantastic to me. And I had a hard time getting into the Final Fantasy games after 9, with the exception of 12, which I loved. I don't know.
12 was a great game.
I didn't really dig Final Fantasy X. It's one of my least favorite ones, but I do love this track. Like I said, because it was the first PS2 game and the characters finally started looking realistic, I remember playing this one back when I was in college and just sort of grooving to this song because, well, as it's a battle theme, you hear it a million times and you got it in your head. You start, like, I'll say, bouncing along with the characters as they, like, prepare for their turn.
And you start humming it when you wake up in the morning, and it just kind of they're earworms.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And this is definitely one of those.
I appreciate the fact that you and your wife have this game, Todd, as kind of a connection between you two, because Rob Nichols and his wife have the exact same story. It was like the first game they ever played together.
Oh, okay.
They play through it together all the time, and it's kind of like something that they share. So that's really interesting that you guys have a very similar story.
When we met, she was playing
Kingdom Hearts,
yeah. And
I didn't know that. I just guessed it because she's a fanatic over that.
She's a Disney fanatic. But she had no idea who these other random characters that were showing up in the game.
Oh, okay.
And it's kind of action RPG. It's not really like a Final Fantasy, but it's Square, so there's certainly elements of it. And I was like, well, if you like this, why don't you try Final Fantasy X?
There you go.
And that's that was sort of the beginning of our relationship.
Very cool. All right, want to move on to our next track?
Let's.
Joe, what you got for us tonight?
So this is the boss theme from Great Greed, released for the Game Boy in 1993. This was composed by Katsuro Tajima.
All right, I've never heard this one before, so I'm curious to hear about it.
And we're back. That was the boss theme from Great Greed, released in 1993 for the Game Boy, composed by Katsuro Tajima. Not a very long loop there, so we got to listen to it a couple of times, but I think it's a really cool track, especially coming back in the Game Boy era. What'd you guys think?
This reminds me of Link entering a dungeon on Halloween night. It has a very dungeon feel, very Nintendo dungeon feel, and a very kind of spooky feel at the same time. Bump, 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 bump. You get those little kind of trills and the very up and down lead melody. Really cool, and I like the instrument choice on this track as well. I mean, I don't know if they were going for a spooky feel or not, but it sounded like there's like harpsichords going on there and some really kind of creepy stuff going on.
So this game, as I learned, is not really a spooky game at all. It's actually very much like a game that some of you may have heard of, Earthbound. It's got that same quirky sense of humor that Earthbound has. All the places and characters in this game are named after foods, so it's got kind of a sense of irreverence to it. It's a pretty straightforward RPG. There are cutscenes for the battles, and you play as a main character with your occasional ally helping you out in battles. But what's kind of neat about it is that it doesn't take itself too seriously, and it's one of the few, I'll say, really good RPGs for the Game Boy. I had never heard of it before I started learning about the Game Boy library at Todd's suggestion. I've been trying to familiarize myself with some more of the games, and I came across this one, and I thought it was really cool. And I'd never heard of it before, and no one I talked to had ever heard of it before, so I thought it'd be kind of neat to introduce everyone to what for me was a new game.
That's really cool. So these battles are more like the traditional RPG turn-based
right,
battles?
Yeah. So it's battles are one-on-one. You walk throughout the overworld, and you get into random battles, and it looks almost, I'll say, like the original Dragon Quest or Dragon Warrior screen, where there's a little square that pops up on the screen, and you see your character and you see the one enemy you're fighting against, and you go back and forth. And if you mash the A button, you can fly through most battles pretty quickly, as long as you have the right healing spells and potions to keep your health up. But this is a fun one. It's not super long. You could get through the entire game in a few hours. It's not like a 40 or 50 hour thing. But then again, it's a Game Boy game, so that's about on par. Highly worth it. If you could track down a cart, great. It's kind of expensive, but if you can, if not, it's probably pretty easy to download and play on any emulation type program.
I love me some Game Boy soundtracks. I'm just going to say that because I didn't pick it. Because oddly, I didn't pick any Game Boy games, so I'm just going to throw that out there. And I agree with you, Ed. This definitely sounds like an underground sort of, water dripping from the ceiling kind of a track.
Yeah, for sure.
It could definitely be played in, like a cave or something like that. But no, this is the boss theme, and it's not as fast-paced or intense as you might expect from a boss theme. But for a game that doesn't take itself too seriously and is kind of lighthearted, this is about as dark as the game gets.
So is there a reason it's called Great Greed?
I don't know. That's a good question.
Because it's a really interesting name
Way
for
to
a
do
game.
your research, Joe.
I don't know why it's called that. I saw a number of advertisements that were put out when the game came out, which you could actually buy on eBay if you have, lots of money with nothing to do. But I don't think I've seen an explanation for why the game is called what it's called. We should look that up later.
Let's see.
Or we can look it up right now.
As Great Greed begins, you are accidentally warped to another dimension by a wizard by the name of Microwave. With no immediate way back, you help the people fight off the scourge named Biohaz, who is consuming this dimension with evil and destruction.
Oh, this is delightful.
This new dimension you will find yourself in is not terribly unlike the one you came from, with the exception that everyone is named after foods or food-related items, and most of the monsters appear to be mutated vegetables and the like. So it says the battle system does not use any menus, switching all commands to simple button pushes. A is attack, B is a dodge, start will run, and the D-pad is shortcuts to certain spells. That's cool.
And that is really cool. That was going to be the other thing I wanted to bring up, is rather than, like he just said, flip through menus, you have almost like a quick menu for the 4 spells up, down, left, and right that you want to use the most often. And in a game that really requires you to heal after almost every battle, because most battles will wear your character down a lot, you need to be able to do that quickly. And this was, I'll say, a pretty clever thing for the time, where most games just had terrible menus and everything was super abbreviated, and you could never even understand what you were buying or what you were equipping or what you were using. Because of space limitations. This one does really well in addressing that.
Kind of feels to me like it's like the Final Fantasy Mystic Quest, like mashed up with Earthbound, kind of.
That's fair. Yeah, I'd say that's pretty accurate.
And I like when, instead of trying to smoosh home TV console concepts into a Game Boy, they innovate new concepts for the Game Boy that work better with a handheld, lower resolution screen. And this one seems to do that very well, with doing away with lots of small text-based, tiny pop-up windows, and really just getting you right into the action very quickly. So that's cool.
It's nice that if you don't have to grind much in this game, but if you do want to, and even if you don't, when you're just fighting the random battles, you could do it quickly. The screens load instantaneously. You fight your battle. A lot of them are just button mashers, but you can go through them quickly because of the lack of extra windows and menus and things like that, which for a game, where you just want to, I'll say, get on with the story and kind of have fun appreciating it, it was really well done for its time. I would expect that from a game nowadays, but back then you just didn't see it that often. So
Yeah.
I think this game is unique in that sense.
Especially a game developed by Namco, who isn't really known for RPGs that much. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, for sure. I grew up playing almost exclusively games by Square and or Enix, and then later Square Enix.
Squeenix.
Yeah, so the Final Fantasies, the Dragon Warriors, and that line of games and the ones related to it. So I really tried for this show to pick non-Squaresoft or non-Enix stuff, and I thought this was a really cool game to introduce to people.
Cool.
It also says here that the game automatically autosaves after every successful battle, which is an interesting
Wow.
mechanic.
That's way ahead of its time.
Yeah, that's something that you see now, but
Yeah.
certainly not back in those days. You would have to go back to town and stay at an inn or talk to a priest or
Exactly.
whatever.
Cool.
Yeah, so if you have
Or die in some
$75
cases.
lying around, you could pick up one of these carts on eBay, or you could just, try to download it somewhere. But it's highly worth playing if you're into Game Boy in the least.
That's pretty cool. All right, let's move on to my first pick of the night. We're going to listen to a little bit more modern game right now. We're going to listen to The Cove Battle from Darkest Dungeon. This came out on the Switch in 2016, composed by Stuart Chatwood.
No quid pro quo.
All right, boys and girls, that was The Cove Battle from Darkest Dungeon, which was released on the Switch in 2016, composed by Stuart Chatwood. I've heard many a thing about this game, very mixed reviews, and I do like the soundtrack a lot. It probably doesn't hold up as well outside of the game, but it's really dark. I guess it kind of fits the description of the title, but it's very percussive, and it feels like, I don't know, like an arena battle movie, like just two armies kind of like trying to face off against each other. There's a lot of real intense drum hits, some very whiny lead instruments. It's not quite industrial, and it's not quite like orchestral. It's kind of like, I don't know, somewhere in the middle. What are your guys' opinions?
It certainly fits the game. Joe and I played this very briefly.
Very briefly.
In your briefs?
Well, maybe. I made what I will say is the mistake of purchasing the game sort of sight unseen.
I am glad that I just borrowed it.
Like on paper, it looks
like a great game.
Yeah.
Screenshots look good. Even like gameplay video looks decent enough. And I read a lot of great things about it. So I was like, okay. So not entirely sight unseen, but like having not played it.
right.
And just bounced right off of it. I played it for maybe 20 minutes and couldn't get into it. But as you just heard, the music is good.
Oh, yeah, this track is fantastic. I remember hearing for the premise of the game that you go into these dungeons, but the amount of time you could spend in there and the amount of times you can go into a dungeon is limited because you risk like losing your sanity being among all these monsters and crazy things, and you would then lose your hero and have to hire a new one. And I thought that was kind of a cool mechanic for a game. I really wanted to like this because, just like Todd, I'd read a lot of good stuff about it and how this was a really great RPG for the Switch, which at the time had, all of like 2 RPGs for it.
Yeah.
And I booted it right up, and I didn't especially care for the art style, but when you're right at the beginning of the game, you're in this town, and you have to put your party together and go into the first dungeon, and there's just a million things to click on the screen, and I couldn't quite figure out what I was supposed to do, and it just didn't make sense to me, and none of it felt intuitive. And maybe if I had given it more of a try, I might have gotten it, but I don't know, it didn't hit me, so I quit early on that game.
So to your point, there is a 8-part video on YouTube. I think it's 8 half-hour videos, basically a person describing how to play this game. Like the tutorial is 4 hours long.
I mean, that kind of tells you something. I didn't even want to give it more than 15 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, he goes really into depth. So basically, the game is like a side view 2D, side-scrolling style game, but it's like you're always in battle mode. It looks like you're always in like the Final Fantasy battle mode as you wander through these dungeons, and it looks like mainly point and click. I don't think there's any direct action. It's all menu driven, as far as I could tell.
Well, it's sort of in the same way that like the early Final Fantasy and whatnot games were just menu driven. You were select fight, and then you select the monster you want to fight, and play proceeds. But there's a lot more strategy involved in this game.
Right. It kind of looked like, I don't know, like the Souls games, but twice as complicated, like twice as many options and things to look at.
If Souls game were turn-based, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I think they were kind of going for that.
Whoa, that'd be kind of cool.
Well, I actually have a game for you then. It's called Darkest Dungeon.
Well, maybe not then.
I was actually going to talk about how much I like the art. I'm surprised that you did not like it, Joe, but it felt to me like a very early 2000s, kind of like adult comic book style. Very thick lines, not a lot of color.
Very Spawn-like.
But very well drawn. You can tell it was done with like pencils and then inked over it. It was pretty cool, in my opinion, anyway.
It kind of reminded me a lot of, I'll say, a darker Paper Mario. And
but more realistic.
But I just don't dig that particular style, so it didn't really do it for me. But I was willing to look past that because I knew what it looked like before I played it. But once I got into that main town, couldn't quite figure out what to do, and nothing felt intuitive. I rage quit very quickly.
Yeah. Well, that's a shame. I mean, it's definitely, from what you're describing, it's not a game for me. I just kind of happened across some video on YouTube and thought it looked really cool, and the music sounded really cool. Stuart Chatwood is also the guitarist in the band The Tea Party, and the three of us just looked up some videos on YouTube of The Tea Party, and it sounds like kind of generic, like mid-90s, early 2000s rock, alternative rock music. Basically,
like sub-grunge, like not like Nirvana level sort of alternative rock, but very subdued.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess the lead singer just passed away this year, which is why there were a lot of sudden resurgences of their music popping up on YouTube and such. So, anyways, so Stuart Chatwood is the guitarist in that band, and also the composer of Darkest Dungeon. So, there you have it. Not a game I'd want to recommend, but it does have a full soundtrack that you can go out and purchase on Bandcamp at stuartchatwood.bandcamp.com. So, check it out. It's pretty cool. All right, let's move on to our next one. I think, Todd, it's your turn, right?
I believe you're circling back to me, yes.
What is your second pick?
My second track is also one of the ones that has been on this document for a year now, which is the battle theme from Octopath Traveler. This was originally released on the Switch in 2018, although has since been released on PC. This is composed by Yasunori Nishiki.
Cool.
Oh man, this is awesome.
Welcome back. That was the battle theme from Octopath Traveler, released on the Switch in 2018, composed, of course, by Yasunori Nishiki. I picked this mainly because I was playing Octopath Traveler, I believe I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, when we started forming this episode, and was absolutely obsessed with the game. I have since become not obsessed with the game, stopped playing it without finishing it, and moved on. So while the track is really good, the game may be less so. I know that Joe finished it, though.
Yeah, I liked this game. I can't say I loved it. Some parts of it got a little repetitive, and because I don't want to ruin it for Todd or anyone else out there who might be listening who hasn't played it yet, if you're into Squaresoft, if you're into, I'll say, more modern Western RPGs in general, this is a good game and worth playing. The soundtrack obviously is amazing. The battle theme is one you'll hear about 1,000,000 times, and you'll start to, as you hear it, hum it along, and you'll start to, even as I was listening to it there, I was hearing my character in the game with all of his battle exclamations, because obviously that was just the song, but whatever character is your party leader exclaims things throughout the course of the battle, and it's something you'll hear 1,000,000 times as you play the game. It's worth it. It's a good game, but like I said, not great in that there's a lot of repetition. You know, so if you haven't heard, it's 8 characters. You take turns meeting each character. You go to their town, you recruit them. They have some mission that they need to accomplish, and that mission is either in the nearby forest or cave or mansion or, you know, whatever the thing is. And you get through the level, Shire, you fight the boss, and then the character joins you, and you go on to the next chapter and meet the next person. It's a lot of lather, rinse, repeat. So in that sense, it got a little dull for me, but I did play it through, and again, it'd be worth playing just for the music because it's phenomenal.
Cool. Yeah, speaking of the music, I mean, that's really the only experience I have with this game. And I did really like this track. The first thing I said was that it really sounds like a quintessential, like, Battle Themes 101 kind of track. Like, these are the elements you put together. The 4/4 beat, the violins, dun-dun-dun-dun-dun-dun-dun, with the, you know, upswelling of violins over it. I really like the decrescendo of the violins, like towards the end, right before the loop comes in. Like, that's really cool. That's a little bit new in this kind of a song, so I appreciated that a lot. But I felt like, you know, it's not Nobuo Uematsu composing this, so the composer just kind of like really studied what he did on his Final Fantasy battle themes and really tried to come up with something very similar, but with enough differences to make it their own as well.
This game very much is Square sort of going back to the basics, both in soundtrack and in gameplay. I think they were trying to recapture some of the magic,
the feels,
for lack of it, but the feel of what they had in the SNES days. Even the graphics represent that sort of ideal to some extent. Did they succeed? Mostly,
partially.
Yeah, you know, it's no Final Fantasy VI, but it's
it's got the right feel. The music's amazing. Each individual character's story is good, but
I'm not sure we need 8 of them.
In my travels on the web, I've heard people say they really like it, and I've heard people say it's pretty good. I've never heard anybody say that they hated it. So I guess they did something right.
I'm glad I played it because at the time there weren't a lot of RPGs for the Switch. More have since come out, and I've been branching out into other kind of games, but I stick by my original assessment. It's good, it's not great.
I think they could have made it like Quadropath Traveler because as Joe was explaining, you go through, you meet each of the 8 characters and you go through their little thing, and each of those sort of initial introductions are a couple hours long, and then you go through chapter 2 of each of their stories.
Okay,
and then you go through chapter 3 of each of their stories.
that's pretty disjointed.
And then you go through chapter 4 of each of their stories. So you're going through 32 chapters in this game, each that takes several hours, and each have, you go to the cave or the mansion or the whatever and beat the boss, and then you move on to the next one. So it does get repetitive. It could have been fewer characters and been better.
Or, maybe some of the characters team up, meet each other, and so instead of, you might have 8 and 8 for chapters 1 and 2, but then you have 4 chapters for 3, and it's each character set pairing off with each other. That would have maybe helped it become a little more fresh, and different characters team up with each other, and
something like that would have been really cool. But it definitely gets a little formulaic by chapter 3.
Yeah,
you keep expecting something different or something, a twist, but it doesn't come.
Maybe if there's a sequel, they'll learn from their feedback from the fans, and
let's see. NES was
up.
8-bit and SNES was 16-bit. This is Octopath Traveler, so what would be the 16 character equivalent of Octo?
I don't do math on this show.
I don't know. Do you want that in hexadecimal, or are we looking for... Anyhow, all right, let's move on to our next track. Joe, what's your next pick of the night?
This one is called Running Fire from Disgaea, Hour of Darkness. Came out for the PS2 back in 2003. This track was composed by Tenpei Sato.
Ooh, I heard he's pretty good. Let's check it out.
And we're back. That was Running Fire from Disgaea, Hour of Darkness. Came out on the PS2 in 2003. This track was composed by Tenpei Sato. Wow. That track is all over the place.
Yes, indeed.
It has a million different pieces to it, a million different parts, but it's perfect for this game. Have either of you guys played this or any of the Disgaea games?
I have not played any of them, and that was an incredibly upbeat battle theme.
Agreed.
Not something that I would expect from a battle theme.
Yeah, I've never played it either, and I thought that when it first started, I thought it was like, oh, so this is what happens if Danny Elfman composes RPG battle music, and then it just went way off the rails.
Yeah, when it came in with those I'm a Monty Python fan, so I keep thinking of banging two empty halves of coconuts together.
Yes.
But the finger clackers, what do you call them?
Castanets.
Castanets. When those came in, I'm like, this is a battle theme? What's going on here?
So I had finished playing Final Fantasy Tactics for PS1, I'll say a year or two before this came out. And Tactics was the first tactical RPG that I had ever played, and I loved it, and that was the game that got me into the genre. And at one point I typed into, 2004 era Google games like Final Fantasy Tactics. And Ogre Battle came up, but it was already expensive at the time, and Fire Emblem came up, but I didn't have a Game Boy Advance at the time. So Disgaea came up, and I had a PS2, so I said, all right, well, I'll give this one a try, and because PS2 games were a dime a dozen back then, and kind of still are now by and large, I think I picked this game up for like $10 or $12 or something like that, and popped it in, and I'm so glad I did, and I've played all the other Disgaea since. So this is a grid-based tactical RPG.
Well, I'm out.
Yeah, I know it's not Todd's thing, and I don't know if you'd really dig it either, Ed, but it's...
No.
The shtick to this game is that you can insanely level your characters up to like level 1 million so that you're attacking for 50 million damage.
Wow, that's some scale.
Oh yeah, it loses all sense of I'll say not even reality, but it loses a sense of scale as you get further and further into the game, because they don't limit damage, they don't limit hit points, they don't limit money or items or anything like that, because every item you could get and every weapon you can get, you can actually go into the weapon or into the item itself, and it's called like the item world, and you fight grid-based battles inside the weapon, and the further into the weapon you make it, the more the weapon levels up.
This is bizarre.
It's a weird mechanic, but all the Disgaea games have it. So there's a main story where you play the role of this demon who's trying to fight off the onslaught of goodness and of angels, and you're trying to spread darkness over the world. So you're already like playing it from the opposite perspective of every other game, but it's done with a very JRPG flair, so that it's very lighthearted and silly and anime-like. If you guys haven't played this game, you've probably come across the characters. They look like little blue penguins called Prinnies, and they call everyone Dude.
Oh,
Dude.
yeah. Yep.
That's from this.
Okay.
But apart from the main story, every game lets you, I'll say, go into the weapons and go into the items to level them up. And within each battle, there's elemental or color-based portion to the grid, where if you defeat enemies in a certain item and you hit certain triggers on the battlefield throughout the course of the battle, you gain bonuses, and they get harder and harder as the game goes on, with really no limit. And there's about 1 billion side battles and low encounter enemies that you could fight that make it colorful and interesting as you go on. If you played one, you've played them all. I would recommend Disgaea 1, or just Disgaea Hour of Darkness, as the best of the bunch, because the other ones do the exact same thing. Great game if you're into tacticals in any way, shape, or form, and if you're not, you would find this silly and ridiculous.
Yeah, man. So do the battles have scripted events and stuff? Because this song to me felt more like the intro to like an anime, where there's different scenes going on and different things.
No, but when you get into the higher level stuff, some of the special moves you could do come with a whole, I don't want to say a movie, but they come with a slightly lengthy animation, and you could always turn them off, or you could always bypass them.
Okay.
But when you watch them, it does kind of play out a little bit like an anime.
Like Knights of the Round, but cooler?
Yeah, kind of like that. And with the ability to skip it.
Cool. I want to watch some video of this at least. I probably wouldn't want to play it too much, but I'm kind of curious to see what you're talking about with billions of hit points and damage points and stuff.
Find a video of someone who's 150 hours into the game, who's crazy leveled up, and does it that way. There's also a huge number of character classes you could do, and more things that get unlocked as you go. So if you get a level 99, Black Mage, you can do what's called resetting the character. The game doesn't go back in difficulty or in scale, but you have this level 1 character that all of a sudden, within 2 battles, you can level back up to 99, but he's at instead of being a Black Mage, he's a Black Wizard now.
Cool.
And, and he can do more things, and his skills are higher, and his starting stats are higher. So you can keep resetting your characters with higher starting stats to get them to that point where they're attacking for 5 million damage.
Pretty sweet.
To get into the really upper level stuff, you have to do that to even stand a chance against the enemies.
It's like the Dragon Ball Z of tactical RPGs.
Yeah, and that's only if you choose to do all the endless side stuff. If you want to play the main story, you can get through it in probably 15 or 20 hours, because it's not that difficult.
Gotcha.
But to do all the side stuff is what makes it fun.
Cool.
So try the original, and if you like it, there's many other ones.
This was from Atlas, right?
Yep, they all
Company?
are.
That explains it. Has a very kind of Persona feel to it for me.
Yeah, that's kind
Kinda goofy, but kinda dark at the same time.
Around that same time. It doesn't take itself seriously. It's kind of slapstick. Yes, you are this demon, ruling hell and trying to, figure out a way to get to Earth to take over the place. It's a lot of silliness.
Yeah, it's lighthearted.
Yeah, if you're into tacticals, this one's a must play.
Cool. All right, moving on. Another kind of lighthearted game. A game that presents itself as being lighthearted, but will probably rip your heart out at the same time. We're going to listen to Dangerous Guys and More Dangerous Guys from Mother 3, one of my favorite games. This came out in 2006 on the Game Boy Advance, composed by Shogo Sakai.
Ooh, these are the kind that your mother always warned you about.
Dangerous. And more dangerous. That was Dangerous Guys and More Dangerous Guys from Mother 3, released in 2006 on the Game Boy Advance, composed by Mr. Shogo Sakai. Oh, goodness, Mother 3. I was actually going to do an entire episode on Mother 3 with Kung Fu Carlito, but then the Mercado brothers did a show on Mother 3 just as we were starting to plan ours. So that did not happen because we didn't want to look like we were mooches. But maybe in a year or so, we'll get back together again and do a show on Mother 3. In the meantime, we're listening to Dangerous Guys and More Dangerous Guys. So as I was just explaining to Todd and Joe was wondering why this didn't sound so much like a battle theme, and I explained that there are about 25 different classifications of enemies I think you can face during this game, and they all have different battle themes ranging everywhere from really hard rock and stuff to very kind of smooth, cool. So like the Dangerous Guys are like, they've got like slick back hair and sunglasses and like a cigarette dangling out of their mouth. So this the songs always try to kind of like encompass the type of enemy that you're
More cool
fighting.
and dangerous.
Yeah.
Do they snap their fingers while they walk down the street?
They may as well. I mean, it looks like they would be the kind of
Oh, that's pretty
guy
badass.
to do that dangerously.
There's some bad dudes.
Yes. And so, I don't know what you guys think about the music before we start talking about the rest of it.
Well, as Joe had pointed out, it didn't really sound a lot like a battle theme, but listening to you explain, I have not played this game, so I don't. And I played very limited amount of Earthbound, so my knowledge of the Mother series in general is pretty limited. So, but listening to you explain how all of that works, I guess it makes sense. So you're fighting these cool dudes?
You're fighting these dangerous guys.
These dangerous guys,
Cool
these
dudes.
cool dangerous
Cool
guys.
dudes and more cool dudes. So the whole concept behind battling, have you played Earthbound?
Briefly, yeah.
Okay,
I
so-
haven't finished it, but I've played it.
Imagine the battles looking very similar to the way Earthbound does, where you've just got 3 boxes on the bottom with or 2 or 3, depending on how many is in your party, with your magic points and your health points, etc. And the enemies are on top, and there's a swirly kind of kaleidoscopic background swirling in the background. The main difference is that whenever you physically attack an enemy, if you continue to push the attack button on the beat, you can go for extra hits. Up to like 8 or 16 additional hits. So you can really do some extra damage as long as you're listening to the music and going on the beat. So if you listen to more dangerous guys, they throw in little off-time, little drum rolls or little horn stabs to kind of throw you off. So as you get farther through the game, you start facing more difficult versions of some of the enemies you fought in the beginning of the game, and you'll get these more difficult musical pieces that are a little bit modified from their original counterparts in order to try to throw you off of your rhythm. So it was a really clever way to kind
What a
of...
cool mechanic. I
Yeah,
like that.
yeah.
That's really neat.
It's fun, and because the music is so amazing, it really kind of forces you to kind of focus on it and really kind of play along with the beat. It's not necessary. I mean, you could probably still beat the game if you didn't do the on the beat mechanic, but I think it would still, it wouldn't be as easy. Not that it's an easy game, but it would be a little less easy for you. So I really like that mechanic. I really love this soundtrack. There's like 250 pieces of music in this game. It's like a 6-hour-long soundtrack. It's absolutely unbelievable.
How long's the game? Did you beat it or did you just play it?
Oh no, I beat it. The game, God, I don't know. It's probably about 20 to 30 hours.
Okay, so
maybe
nothing crazy.
It's pretty linear. There's not a lot of deviation you can take from your path. It feels much more like Undertale, if you're guys have played that. So you're kind of in an RPG setting, but there are points where you can go into other towns, but there's usually no real reason to do so unless you just kind of wanted to buff yourself up a little bit. But for the most part, there's not a lot of side quests or anything. You're just kind of following this adventure from place to place. But it's so well written. The graphics are amazing. The music is incredible. The story is just beyond words. I mean, I felt so many emotions playing this game. It wasn't even funny. And I played most of this game without music because I was playing at work. So I just had the volume. I didn't have speakers on my computer at work. So I would go home and play a little bit with music and then go, play at work and then have no music. And so after I beat the entire game, I went back and listened to the soundtrack and I was like, man, I really should have just played the whole thing through with music because I missed out on so many really cool pieces of music that I never heard while I was playing the game, and I wish I had heard in context. Anyways, it's a game that I recommend everybody play. Even if you didn't like Earthbound or haven't played Earthbound, you don't really need to have played it in order to play. You might be a little extra rewarded towards the end if you played Earthbound, but it's not something that's going to be like, I don't know what's going on, because it's fairly easy to understand it all. And it's, one of those games that should have come out in the US that never did, which is a shame.
I have to give this one a try. Sounds great.
Do give it a try, and I will be doing a show, hopefully, on the soundtrack. It's going to be just as much of a difficulty narrowing down the tracks to play on the show out of a list of 250 incredible pieces of music. So, but whatever we do end up with will be gems, I'm sure. So, there we go. How about our next track? Todd, I believe it is your turn.
Yep, my next track is one that I actually picked this calendar year. It is Order and Chaos from The Last Story. This was released on the Wii in 2012 and composed by Nobuo Uematsu.
Oh, there's a shocker.
Welcome back. That was Order and Chaos from the last story released on Wii in 2012, composed by my man, Nobuo Uematsu. I purchased this game
And never played.
I purchased this game because Nobuo Uematsu did the soundtrack and promptly never played it,
That's crazy, man.
which is crazy, but I should remedy that because
Yeah.
we watched a video while the music was playing, and the game actually looks pretty decent. And Joe said he played it.
It's really solid. I had my Wii for, I don't know, 3 or 4 or 5 years and wanted an RPG for it because I still hadn't moved on to other kind of games at that point. And there, well, as you know, aren't many for the Wii. And I remember this one was about 6 months from coming out when I first discovered it. And so I had this huge anticipation waiting for the game to come out, and I ordered it on Amazon. I think I even pre-ordered it. And it was, $49.99 or whatever it was at the time. And I got it the day it came out and popped it into the Wii. And I probably put 40 or 50 hours into this, played through the entire thing, and I really enjoyed it. The problem is, as I was just telling you guys, I don't remember much about it now. And even though it was only 7 years ago.
So good, but not memorable.
Yeah, I mean, the music's great, obviously. I remember liking the characters at the time. I especially liked the battle system, which was very active and required you to think of different ways to win battles. There were a few stealth segments that I really liked where you had to, sneak around a castle without being seen and evading all the guards. And there were ways that you could quietly take them out. So I liked that aspect of it, which you don't see in RPGs too much. I also remember liking the way the towns and the dungeons were laid out because you could they were almost maze-like. There's one major city that you go into and you spend a whole chapter of the game there, and you have to walk up and down every single side street in the city to get to the one merchant that has the item you're looking for, the one NPC that tells you the piece of information you need. There's a really cool arena system in this game once you get to the upper levels as well, and I really spent a lot of time on that too. Cool. So there's a lot of things to like about the game. I don't remember much about the story other than liking it while I was playing it and only playing it the once. And once I moved on from the Wii, I never thought about it again. If it ever got re-released or remastered, I would probably dig it and play it over again.
Yeah, it's a very late Wii release. I think it came out just before it came out August of 2012 in the US, and then the Wii U got launched 2 months later. So it was one of the very last Wii games to ever come out, which is why I think that it didn't get a lot of recognition. I think people were already looking forward to the Wii U at that point, or poo-pooing it, or
people
whatever.
look
Anybody
forward
was
to
actually
the Wii
looking
U?
forward to the Wii U.
Hey, I was looking forward to it.
I looked forward to it too. I mean, I was a day one.
I got a launch
purchaser
day.
on that.
Yep.
I remember. I mean, your brother helped me get my launch
That's
day
right.
copy.
I remember that.
He was working at Best Buy at the time.
So, music-wise, I was kind of surprised by a lot of elements of this song. I really was taken aback at the chuggy guitars underneath those violins, which you don't hear much in Uematsu compositions, but it brought to mind a lot of his work with Earthbound Papas and Black Mages. They were a lot more rockin' than a lot of his compositions were. So, this being kind of later on in his career, I wonder if he was taking a lot of inspiration from some more of his live arrangements and trying to add them into his video game compositions.
His career is still going, sir.
No, I know. But it's started in the 80s, so I would consider this later in his career.
I suppose. But you were saying that his career is over, and it decidedly is not.
Well, he's definitely taken a step back,
man. We found Todd's weak spot.
I guess so.
Uematsu sucks, Todd.
I mean,
Head explode.
you say whatever you want to say. I don't care.
So I'm just curious what you guys thought about the particular track. Todd, why'd you choose this one?
I pretty much picked it because it's a good
Uematsu.
track. It's a nice groove. It's Nobuo Uematsu, and it wasn't a Square track. This is the only non-Square Square game that I picked.
But still a new Uematsu track.
I enjoyed it. The thing is, I don't remember it that well. I remember because it's the battle theme and because you really have to concentrate on some of the harder battles, especially the bosses. I didn't listen to the battle music as much as I have in other RPGs where, you could just press A to fight. And
right.
With this, there's timing and there's strategy.
And there's a lot of sound effects and voice going on while you're battling too. So I think the music takes a real back seat to
it does.
the action.
At least the battle music. I mean, a lot of the overworld themes and the town themes, those I remember a little better, but this battle theme, it doesn't ring a bell really. I mean, it's cool and I enjoyed listening to it here, and I kind of remember it, but it wasn't one of those ones that I'll remember forever. And the second I hear the first note, I'll go, ooh, that's from the last story.
Yeah.
Well, it seemed like it was live action in the video that we saw. Like, you don't enter into battle, you just approach a monster and start battling them.
Right, it is. And your environment plays a big role in that. And so you really have to think and strategize in the battles. You can't just muscle your way through or button mash.
Right.
It's
So a guy like me who just spams attack probably wouldn't have a very good time.
the music definitely takes a back seat, at least during some of the battles, which is why I guess this one didn't really resonate with me much, or at least it wasn't super memorable for me.
Fair enough. How about one that is super memorable for you?
All right, well then, moving on.
To a more memorable track.
For him, anyway.
My next pick is the boss theme from Zoda's Revenge Star Tropics 2, released for the Nintendo Entertainment System in 1994. This track was composed by Takashi Kumagawa and Yashio Hirai.
All right.
And we are back. That was the boss theme from Zoda's Revenge, Star Tropics 2, released in 1994 for the NES, composed by Takashi Kumagawa and Yashio Hirai. So, I picked Star Tropics 2 and not Star Tropics 1 because, well, I figured everyone already knows Star Tropics 1 and has heard the entire soundtrack a million times, probably.
Fair enough.
And I wanted to talk a little bit more about this game in relation to the original, what it gets right and what it gets wrong. Overall, a fantastic game. I was never able to beat this one, although I never beat the original one either. Two of my, I'll say, retro gaming shames. Someday I'd like to, go back to it. It gets very difficult as you get further into it. And I know that as you get to the very end, you have to go back and beat all of the bosses all over again. So it's one of those nearly impossible sequences that you have to do to finish the game.
Fun.
But in sharp contrast from the first game, I like that you can finally move in 8 directions instead of just 4, so the handling is way better. I like the Zelda 3 style or Zelda 1 style action and fighting element to it, although I would have liked, I'll say, a little better work on the hitboxes and the actual production value on the game. I find it to be a little clunky. You can sometimes swing and miss or swing and get hit when you didn't intend to. I also don't like that you get no invulnerability when you get hit in this game.
Oh, yeah.
The second you get hit, if you're off by a little bit, you get hit, and if you're not quickly able to get back on track, you'll get hit again and again and again.
That's
and
one
again,
of my pet peeves. Yeah.
What do the streamers call them? iframes?
Yes, invincibility frames.
So this game does not have that, which bothered me. And the other thing that I didn't like is that right at the beginning of the game, there's a part where you're trying to make it through a field, and there are invisible holes in the ground that you fall through, and then you have to fight your way out of the dungeon to get back up into the overworld, and you have to get from point A to point B, and there's a million holes in the ground, and you can keep hitting the same ones over and over again. The problem is you can't see them. You have to memorize the maze-like path through the field, and the game is very, I'll say, unforgiving about making you go through this dungeon again and again and again.
Yeesh.
And it has little annoying things like that. But that said, I wanted to pick an action RPG for this show that not everyone knew and has probably played a million times, so I chose this one. Overall, I think it's a great game and it's worth playing, especially if you only ever played the original, which I think I think everyone's played the original Star Tropics at least a little bit. But if you never played the second one, do. It improves upon the original, but still, in my opinion, leaves a lot to be desired.
I wonder what made the second one so much less popular than the first one.
a very late release in the NES life cycle. By then, Super Nintendo was out and running strong.
Oh, okay.
You could buy this, or in the same year, you could buy Final Fantasy II.
Yes.
Is it possible that people also didn't realize that it was the sequel to Star Tropics 2? Because it's like even the
main
cover
title
art
is-
says Zoda's Revenge.
Yeah.
And then very small print, Star Tropics 2.
Yeah.
Like people may not have realized what.
So all
what it
around,
actually
like,
was.
at least 3 different instances of bad marketing choices.
Right.
So, makes sense. I was struck by the music in the sense that if I didn't know that the composers were Japanese, I would have thought this was an American composed track. It's got those very thick drums, like that very thick kind of snare sound that's kind of overused. And then the instruments, there's no aftertouches on them. It's all just very kind of like plunking on your Casio keyboard. And I'm not saying that it's a bad song. I really like the melody, and it's a listenable, good song, but it has that kind of simple feel that a lot of the Americans, like, they just didn't have the sound drivers that were as good as what the Japanese had at the time. So it feels like it's a well-produced song made with very simple methods, which is cool and weird for an RPG that came out of Japan. So it felt to me more like something like George Sanger, like Maniac Mansion, that kind of a tune, rather than a Japanese tune.
And I get that I'm probably stretching the definition of RPG with this one, because this is much more of an action RPG, like I said, Legend of Zelda style, than a straight up RPG. But for each one of my tracks, I try to pick a different kind of role playing game to just, I don't know, keep things slightly different. So I would almost call this one more of an action adventure game than an RPG, but I think it's close enough.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
We'll accept it.
Yeah, I think in major video game circles it's considered an RPG, because what else would you consider it, right? Anyhow, I think that moves us on to my next pick, and we are going to listen to one of my favorite action RPGs, which pairs up nicely with your last pick. This is Nuclear Fusion from Seiken Densetsu 3, otherwise more recently known as Trials of Mana. This came out on the SNES in 1995 and more recently on the Switch in 2019, composed by Hiroki Kikuta. All right, that was Nuclear Fusion from Seiken Densetsu 3, aka Trials of Mana. Came out on the SNES actually came out on the Super Famicom in 1995, and then later on the Switch globally in 2019, composed by Hiroki Kikuta. And I love this track. It's one of my favorites from the game. And the first thing that grabs me is that really thick, kind of funky snare sample with those really, really fast bass notes. And then everything over it is really cool, too. It's a long track. It's like 1.5 to 1:50 before the loop. And it just goes to a lot of really cool places. This is a track that plays in the overworld during the battle sequences of the game, but only in a specific area. And every time I come to this area and the song starts playing, I'm always like, oh yeah, I can't wait till I can hear this for 15 loops, because it's what you generally end up doing once the game starts. But yeah, I mean, Hiroki Kikuta worked on Secret of Mana as well, and you can kind of hear a lot of those trends from Secret of Mana kind of coming through. We were talking about that kind of xylophone / marimba / steel drum, those arpeggios going in the foreground. And Secret of Mana had a lot of those too. And what'd you guys think of this song?
Yeah, I really like that. And I like that you bring up that part in particular. It reminded me a lot of what would come later, the Final Fantasy VII boss theme that has the really fast arpeggio part.
Yeah.
I like it when a good battle theme or a boss theme does that because it, I don't know, gets you kind of pumped and into the fight. And I thought that was really cool. And I've never played this game. I had Secret of Mana back in the day, but never beat it. And I had Final Fantasy Adventure back in the day, but never beat it. And because Seiken Densetsu 3 was never released here, I never had this game until recently. So I'll have to boot this one up, and maybe I will actually finish one of these games for a change.
Same.
Okay, so to prepare you guys, and to prepare anyone else who hasn't played it yet, if you are familiar with Secret of Mana is, if there's like a spectrum of action RPGs from like Link to the Past to Chrono Trigger, which is like more of a turn-based battle, but kind of has those moving around elements.
Right.
This is more towards the Chrono Trigger side. It's still real-time battle. You still walk up to characters and push a button to attack them, but it is not as quick and responsive as Secret of Mana is, and it's much more focused on using magic and special abilities whenever your meters power up and stuff like that. So I don't know whether that's going to make you like it less or more. It's just because Cam was playing this game and he was very taken aback by how different it was from Secret of Mana. And I think that if he had been prepared ahead of time, he might have appreciated it more. He didn't like that it was a little bit slower than Secret of Mana. I think he was looking for the same kind of fast-paced combat that the original game had.
I think with Secret of Mana, though, that's taken on such a cult status among gamers our age that anything that's not Secret of Mana is going to come off as not as good if it's talked about in the same sentence or in that same, realm. And because this is, I don't want to say a sequel, but because this is the next game in the series, I think a lot of fans would, who've never played this one, are automatically going to go back and say, well, it's just not as good.
Yeah.
But because I haven't played Secret of Mana in so long, I think I'm going to try, as you were suggesting during the break, I'm going to try Trials first, or not first, but before I go back to Secret and see if I have a little more of a fresh perspective on it.
Yeah, it's similar to Octopath Traveler in that you pick your team of 3 from several different characters. And instead of being forced to do everybody's story, you just take 3 characters and they all start in separate places and have little vignettes about their origins, but then they eventually meet up. And the first character you pick, you kind of follow their story, and then the other 2 characters are kind of like sidekicks, and you kind of go in and out of their stories a little bit, but the main character that you pick is kind of like you follow them. So you can play over and over again with different combinations and get different stories every single time. So it's great for replay value. It was Cam Worma that was complaining, because remember we played a song from this on Embassy Exclusive, and he was talking about how slow the menus were.
Yeah, that's right.
Which I disagreed with a little bit. I didn't think they were that slow, but he... just like the same thing with Secret of Mana. To do a lot of the menu options, you just hold the button down, a little circle comes up, and you select something from a circle. This one you actually have to go to a different screen and select your options, and then go back to the gameplay again. So that kind of jarred him a bit, I think. But if you're prepared for it, maybe you'll be a little more tolerant of it. Anyway, fantastic game, fantastic music, really fun to play, and very rewarding, lots of replay value. So that's my grade A review of Seiken Densetsu.
Also classic SNES era, good solid video game.
Something that really should have come out in the US and took a couple decades to do so.
There's a lot of games like that.
Yeah. Mother 3.
Mother 3.
Anyways, we just mentioned this title, and now we're going to play one of the most quintessential tracks from it. What do we got coming up next, Todd?
So this is my last track, and I basically went for the low-hanging fruit on this show. I think that's pretty obvious at this point, but I went for Chrono Trigger. This is the battle theme. This game was released on the SNES, of course, in 1995, and composed by Yasunori Mitsuda and, of course, Nobuo Uematsu.
I think in lieu of playing the song, we could all just hum it from heart.
Pretty much.
All right, we'll be right back.
Oh man, I mean, do I really need to even go through this?
Yes.
This was the battle theme from Chrono Trigger, SNES 1995, composed by Yasunori Mitsuda and Nobuo Uematsu. What a great song. I mean, I realize that this is the easy pick, but such a great song, such a great game.
Also, you hear this track like, I don't know,
8 million
maybe
times when you play the game.
155 times.
And for those people out there that wanted to get every possible ending in the game, I don't even know, exponentially more.
But you never get tired of it.
But you never get tired of it. It's so good.
Amazing. Unlike with the last story, this is a song that I could guess in, one note.
Yeah,
two notes.
yeah.
Right.
The second you hear it, you go, oh, Chrono Trigger battle theme.
Right. And it's funny, it has that same kind of xylophonic arpeggio like going on that the Sega Densetsu 3 track had.
Same company, same year, same system. Not the same composer, but
yeah,
maybe they were listening to each other work at the same time.
Or they were both influenced by Uematsu. I mean, I know Mitsuda was definitely influenced by Uematsu because he was a mentor of sorts for him. Hiroki Kikuta, I'm not sure as much, but I really feel like, there's a lot of Uematsu influence going on between all the composers over at Square around that era because he was just the big bad. So, but yeah, I've always liked how cool this track feels. Like, you'll have a lot of very kind of sweeping and emotional moments in Chrono Trigger, and even like the areas. Like you'll be in like what does it, like 10 million BC, and you'll be listening to like Ooga Booga like cave songs, but then the battle comes in and it's this like just cool slick modern rock with funky like Kurzweil organs going over it, and it's like they don't change up the battle theme to match what era you're in. It's always this.
It fits for every world you're in.
And they could have changed it, but they knew they had gold with this one, so they just stuck with it, and it works.
You can't improve on the best, right?
Exactly.
And it's got a great, I mean, I'm a sucker for bass lines. Anybody who has been listening to these VGM podcasts and has heard others that I've been on knows that, like I like Soul Blazer, and part of the reason that I like Soul Blazer's soundtrack is those great slap bass.
Yeah.
Lines. Right. So this song also has a great bass line, so that's another thing that attracts me to it. It's just a great song all around.
Agreed.
What a game. It's a classic for a reason.
I don't think we have much more to really say
no,
on it.
I know, it's just a popular game.
Pick, Todd.
Like I said, the depending on how you play the game, Chrono Trigger kind of turn-based battle, but it almost kind of skirts the line of like action RPG, where it's not just two characters on either side of the screen. You do kind of move around to physically like move to where your enemies are, and sometimes you're not within range. It's not like really grid based, but it's more like
sometimes you're surrounding them, sometimes you're on one side of them. Yeah, it sort of broke that very standard RPG good guys on one side, bad guys on the other thing that was going on at the time. That doesn't really exist so much anymore.
Right.
But
at the time.
But I like that the more you played this game and the more you became familiar with each level, the more you could run through an entire forest or cave or dungeon without getting into any battles, because you knew exactly what space, if you stepped on it, would trigger the battle.
Right.
And I think I got to the point in this game where, if you didn't feel like grinding or fighting common battles, you could just avoid them entirely by knowing where to step and where not to step.
Yeah, and sometimes in certain areas, if you defeated all the enemies, they just wouldn't come back anymore. So,
well, that too.
That's pretty cool. This game made the player feel powerful with its gameplay, I think, because it lets you kind of remember things and let you kind of choose how you wanted to play, and also gave you a lot of choice over which endings you had, where you went. You can do a lot of different things to drastically change the world around you, and I think that was a big part of making the kids that were playing this game fall in love with it so much, because you really, in RPGs, kind of almost always followed a linear path, and this one really lets you kind of make some heavy decisions about what you did and what you didn't do. So
I'm a little surprised that Square hasn't really tried to cash in more on the whole Chrono Trigger thing. I mean, they did Chrono Cross, but after that, and a remake of Chrono Trigger on DS, they haven't really done much with the IP.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's one of those, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. They're just too afraid to piss people off by putting out something that... I mean, they're putting all that money into the remake of Final Fantasy VII. I wonder what would have happened had they decided to do something similar with Chrono Trigger instead.
They did. It's called The Last Sphere. It came out for the Switch last year. It's by Square. It follows... It's a spiritual successor to Chrono Trigger. It's okay, I started playing it, but it doesn't have that same, I'll say, magic that Chrono Trigger had.
I don't think Square can really recapture that magic. I think they're sort of past that.
Does it have this battle theme?
No, it does
Not
not.
worth it. Next.
Honestly, yeah. If you guys want to borrow it, I'd be happy to lend it to you. But I didn't dig it. I think your initial assessment was right. It was you can't recreate perfection, and this Chrono Trigger was pretty much a perfect game.
As close to it as you could reasonably get, at least up to this point.
If you want something that has some of that same feel, in the sense that the battle system is the same way and it's made by the same company, and it has some of that feel, try the Lost Sphere. It's not great, but it's not bad either. But they did try to make something in that vein for fans for a new generation kind of thing.
Cool.
Interesting. Didn't know that.
Interesting. All right, let's move on to our next track. I think we're on our last round right now. So, Joe, what is your last pick of the
My
show?
last pick is The Edge of Green from Radiant Historia. It came out in 2010 for the Nintendo DS. This track was composed by Yoko Shimomura.
Ooh, she's definitely one for RPGs.
And we're back. That was The Edge of Green from Radiant Historia, released for the Nintendo DS in 2010. This track was composed by Yoko Shimomura. And that completes the set of 4 different types of RPGs that I chose for this show. I went from a traditional turn-based RPG, to a tactical, to an action RPG, to a straight-up JRPG in Radiant Historia. I love this track. I think it's a wonderful battle theme that it gets you pumped, and it has a little bit of suspense created with the violin part. And I only ever played this for 3DS recently. I was looking for an RPG to play, and I got, maybe 8 to 10 hours into it, and then I realized that I kind of get tired of JRPGs quickly. This is a very good one by all definitions, and if you're into JRPGs, this one is worth playing, and you got to pick it up. But as I found with Dragon Quest XI, even if it's at the top of its game, I just don't have the patience for it nowadays that I used to, and it feels, I'll say, like something I've played already or that I'm just not into. So I never finished this game, but again, as I was saying while the music was playing, that's such a great track. Maybe I need to go back and give it another shot.
It's like Stockholm Syndrome almost. It's like, I remember only the good parts about this.
It's not that I hated it. I don't know. JRPGs kind of wear on me, and I keep forgetting that and trying a new one. So I'll put 10 hours into this, or I think it was like 30 hours into Dragon Quest XI before I finally realized that, oh yeah, that's right. I don't especially like this. I thought the cool thing about this game was the time travel mechanic, that you actually, you'll make it to a point in the game where you accidentally trigger the wrong event happening, and that leads to your side losing the war. But you can, the main mechanic in the game is that you can go back and create a disjunction in the timeline and fix it, although that sets a different series of events in motion. And so you end up playing multiple timelines throughout the course of the game to make different things happen at different times.
That's cool.
I always thought that was a really great mechanic. When I didn't finish the game either, but I played it originally on the DS, and I thought that was a really clever mechanic where you can sort of float around in time and like either find a password or something like that to get through some portion of the timeline or meet a character or any number of things that moves it along.
Yeah, it was a kind of a unique thing, and I think I read about how that worked, and that's what got me into buying the game in the first place. And I did like the music, but again, JRPGs kind of wear on me after a while, and I need to stop convincing myself that no, this time it'll be different, even though it's not. They wear me out, and I'll say something that feels new or different to me, and JRPGs just don't do it anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you on that one too. Like, I've played several JRPGs and enjoyed them, and then like I tried Star Ocean on the SNES, which is like I guess the most traditional kind of JRPG that I've tried, and I just couldn't get into it. Just something about the character and the aesthetic that I just don't gel with. So I kind of fell off it really quickly and never really went back to it. So
I think if this game had been more Super Nintendo sprite based as opposed to like watching an anime, I probably would have liked it even more.
said like a true old man.
Yeah, I'm a grumpy old man. But
I do like the time travel concept, though. I mean, time travel in an RPG is a really good idea.
It is a great
I
mechanic.
tend to really gravitate towards stories that involve time travel done in unique ways. So that perked my interest up as soon as you said that. I don't know if I necessarily want to play the game because of it, but it does kind of make the title of the game make a little more sense. And now I might at least watch a review just to see how they handle the whole time travel mechanic.
Yeah, it is cool. And if you're into that genre, this is among the best, especially for the DS. And the 3DS remake is also, as we were discussing during the break, the sound quality is much better from the 3DS, so you'll appreciate the soundtrack more.
I played it on DS. I don't know what the difference is between the DS and the 3DS version. What do you know?
The 3D.
Is that it? Do you have any
my
idea what they
technical
added?
knowledge of the hardware is lacking, but I can only.
I mean, I'm assuming graphically it's a little bit different and all that, but did they add anything to the story or do you know?
I never
don't know.
played the original, but they. My understanding is that they throw in some extras and they change the menu system a little bit as well.
Well, they had to make the chronology perfect.
Little
so.
tweaks, exactly. All right, ready to move on to our last track of the night?
Yeah.
And I picked something pretty obscure because we were kind of lacking in the very obscure. So you guys might remember the SNES RPG, Lagoon. This is the Sharp X68000 port, which never got released in the US, obviously because it's on the Sharp X68000. This came out in 1990, and it was composed by Hideki Suzuki. This one is Battles of Fate. You're listening to Battles of Fate from Lagoon, the Sharp X68000 port, which came out in 1990 in Japan only, composed by Hideki Suzuki. I don't know, this track just kind of grabbed me. I was kind of screwing around on VGM rips one day and just listening to some random stuff, and this one happened to come on, and I really liked the percussion section. Those drum fills were really cool, and there's that little, it's like a 10-second segment right before the loop where it's just the bass and the drums, and I was like, oh man, that really kind of rips. So I appreciated that a lot. And then I looked a little bit more into the game and noticed that it was a FM version of the SNES soundtrack, because this game also came out on the SNES. And so I looked a little bit deeper and saw that the game was very similar, but there were also a lot of very big differences between the SNES and the X68000 version, so I thought it might be kind of cool to talk about. So, first of all, what did you guys think of the track?
I liked it. It is a very Japanese track. It has those galloping, what do you call them? Which sound sort of typical for the time. I think that happened a lot.
Especially in, like, battle tracks.
Right.
For sure.
Right. But yeah, good solid track.
Yeah, had a nice pace to it. I like the bass part that was there. It made me think I got to check this game out. Since I've probably won't have access to an X68000 anytime soon, we looked up the cost of the SNES cart during the break, and it's pretty cheap, so I might have to pick this one up.
Yeah, it plays a little bit like Link to the Past, I guess, but a little more simple. It's an action RPG. So the difference, one of the major differences between the SNES and the X68000 version, if you're familiar with the SNES version, you just walk up to enemies and you swipe your sword and you can attack enemies. I was watching a playthrough of somebody playing this game for the first time, and he gets to the first dungeon and there's like a slime, which are normally very easy to beat. And he walks up to him and he tries to hit the slime, and he tries to hit the slime, and he tries to hit it, and nothing is happening. Like, he cannot hit the slime. And the slime keeps hitting him, and then he finally, dies in the first enemy because he just can't figure out what to do. He's got a sword, he's got a shield, he's got, everything he needs to go on. This was a guy who played the SNES version and was very familiar with it. So he finally figured out that you need to, very similar to, Ys 1 and 2, you have to kind of hold the attack button down, hold your sword in front of you, and then kind of bump into enemies to get them to die. It's the bump mechanic, which is, popularized in the early Falcom games. So I don't know why they decided to use that in this particular game when a port of it had regular attacks, but that's very interesting. So I don't know if you ever want to try the game. There's your hint on how to start defeating enemies right away. And other than that, the maps are more or less the same. There's some other differences going on. I know in the SNES version, you start in the town, and then if you go a little bit south of the town, there's this beach area, which is completely empty and doesn't really seem to have a purpose. But in the X68000 version, that's where you start the game. You start on the beach, and there's a guy on the beach that kind of tells you where you need to go to talk to whoever it is. It's all in Japanese, but he's kind of the welcome to the game kind of a person, which they completely did away with that whole segment in the SNES version. So weird differences here and there. It had some really good animated cutscenes at the beginning with anime style graphics and some action scenes, which were completely taken out of the SNES version. So if you're a fan of the Super Nintendo version, you might want to check out at least a playthrough video just to see the different things that were taken out of the game when it came over to the US on the Super Nintendo.
Cool.
Yeah.
Is the rest of the soundtrack as good as the battle theme?
Yeah, it's pretty good. I mean, this was one of the most energetic songs, but the rest of them are very well composed. The X68000's got an FM chip very similar to the Genesis with a little stronger sampling capability. So you're going to listen to, early Genesis music, but very well done.
I thought I was pretty familiar with the Super Nintendo RPG library. What company puts this one out?
Zoom.
Why I hadn't heard of it before.
Yeah, they made, they made the Phalanx series.
Okay.
And then Zero Divide, the robot fighting game on the PlayStation.
Okay.
So there were two games, and I think they pretty much went out of business after that. And they did Genocide and Genocide 2 on the X68000, this robot fighting games. But that's pretty much their entire chronology of games. But they did a lot of really cool stuff. The games that they did put out were pretty high quality, so this was their one foray into RPGs that never really went anywhere.
I'll definitely have to check that out.
Yeah.
I saw the video you were watching of it, and it looked pretty good.
Yeah, it's interesting, so worth checking out. So that more or less wraps up our show. Do you guys have any other like honorable mentions or tracks that you might have wanted to pick but didn't make it into the show that people should check out?
I mean, Final Fantasy VI, I mentioned that would have been my alternate track to the Final Fantasy X. I mean, that's just a great battle theme.
I've been a fan of both Square and Enix, and later Square Enix, and basically everything they put out for the Nintendo and Super Nintendo and PlayStation. And I don't know, those are the games I grew up with. I tried to pick different things for this show, unlike Todd. But
I did heavily consider some Fantasy Star tracks.
Oh yeah, that's what I want to say. Yeah, that was really good. I was thinking about a Fantasy Star track as well. But yeah, if you're into this stuff at all, there's a wide variety of not just Squaresoft games out there. Check them out. A lot of them are worth playing.
Cool. I was almost going to play a track from an RPG, Steam-only RPG called Dashboard, Dashbored, and that came out on the PC in 2016, I think, and it had a really good soundtrack from Carbonic. He's like an indie chiptuner, and it had some pretty good battle tracks in there, but I wasn't completely 100% happy with it, like fitting in with the rest of my picks. But it's a game worth checking out. It kind of feels like Undertale if it was a little more sadistic and adult, so kind of interesting there. It's got some neat battle sequences, and the battle sequences in that game, you get special moves and regular moves, and you have to figure out how to weaken your opponents with your special moves in order to make your regular moves become effective on them. So you can insult them, you can like give them the finger, and then they'll like become sad, and then you can hit them and they won't hit you for as much damage in return. So it had a neat little mechanic of interacting with your enemies before just going up to them and like slicing them to pieces, which I felt hasn't really been done in RPGs too much. So yeah, just something cool to check out. I think it's like $5 or $6 on Steam if you're bored and wanting a cool little Undertale knockoff with some neat innovations. Yeah, other than that, not too much. Like I said, RPGs are not my field of expertise, so...
There's a million good ones for the PlayStation 2. Check out the Wild Arms series, and also check out the Psychonin series.
Sorry, Cam, I didn't pick your track.
Both for gameplay as well as for music. There's the Dark Cloud is good as well. I don't know. There's a million of them. You've probably heard of half or more of them.
Quest 64.
Quest. I actually listened to the battle theme for Quest 64. Like, can I really? No.
As much as I love the N64, no, it did not have any good role-playing games. Sorry, end of story.
I know, man. Earthbound or Mother 3 almost came out on the N64, and that. I want to be in that timeline where that came out just to see what that game would have been like.
That would have been disastrous.
Probably.
I mean, you can internet up a demo of Final Fantasy VII on N64. It existed.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. There's only very limited footage of Mother 3 on the N64 being played at like game show expos like CES and stuff like that. So no playable ROMs exist or any demos or anything like that, which is kind of a shame. All right, so let's wrap things up. I want to thank Indira J, a.k.a. Middle Sorcery, for the art, and Trevin Hughes, a.k.a. Dread, for the podcast theme song. Also, our Patreon patrons. And like I said, I mean, we do Embassy exclusive once a month. We'll actually be recording another episode next Friday night. If you did like what you heard on this episode and you want to hear more of the terrible trio that is me and Joe and Todd just talk about
hey, I'm pretty great.
Yeah, you know, you're on the greater side of terrible.
Yeah, fair enough.
But on that show we generally pick topics that are prevalent in game news of the day, or we talk about favorite genres of games. We each come up with a cool topic and a little song that kind of is associated with it. And we chat more about gaming in general than in specific games like we're doing on this particular episode. And generally it's about an hour long.
Music, really. It's just more general gaming nerdery.
Exactly.
You should sign up right away. I got a great topic for next week.
Perfect. I haven't considered mine yet, but I'm sure I'll have some inspiration this week. But we do that once a month, and we put it out, and from the Patreon subscribers that listen, I get a lot of compliments, and they say they really like it, so it might be worthwhile for you. You can find us on Patreon at patreon.com/thevgembassy, and on Facebook at facebook.com/group/thevgembassy, and you can head over to thevgembassy.com and click on our Discord link at the top of the page, and there you will find, well, at least Todd and I always hang out in the Discord, along with a whole bunch of other VG ambassadors and friends of the show. There's always some good gaming discussion going on there.
And not gaming discussion.
And not Joe discussion either, because he's got an account but never shows up.
Yeah, I'll try to make
You're
more
a busy
of an
man. I know. It's okay. And speaking of Patreon, our Patreon subscribers, without which we would not have the awesome equipment that we do today to record this show at our tourist level: Cameron Childs, a.k.a. Bruce Irons of the Mad Gear Band, Michael Bridgewater from Forever Sound Version, Donovan Orofino, and our VG emissaries Chris Murray, Chris Myers, John Jekyll, a.k.a. Mix Master, Ben the Dyad Dishman,
Mix Crossmaster.
Ben the Dyad Dishman from the Dyad Presents, a VGM podcast, Chris Steenerson from the VG Jam podcast, Jordan Worma from the Table to Stage podcast, Volt Supreme, and David Parrish. Our audio attaché members Cameron Worma, Carlito from the Heroes 3 podcast, Scott McElhone, and our brand new audio attaché member Dan Lawton. Welcome, sir, and thank you so much for your pledge. And of course, our VG ambassador, Alex the Messenger, who has just put out a new podcast called A VGM Journey, in which he collects VGM songs that he has sent to his girlfriend over the past year and turns them into podcasts, which I think is a really sweet kind of idea. So listen to that. It's on iTunes, and we're on iTunes as well. You can catch us there. Joe and Todd, thank you so much for hanging out with me tonight and talking about some battle RPG themes. I had a blast.
Oh man, I can nerd out this way all the time.
Glad we finally got this one recorded.
Yes, so now we'll have to come up with another topic that we can spend a year.
We can sit on for a year, yeah.
But it's nice because I've always got a reason for you guys to hang out with me every month to record Embassy exclusives, so we'll get working on topics for that. And VG Embassy will be back in another 2 weeks. If things go as planned, I will be talking to Discord newcomer Bedroth, who we haven't heard much from in real life. So I'm very excited to be talking to him, and we're going to be discussing symphonic music in video games. So that should be a real treat. So we'll see you then in 2 weeks. Peace out, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.